So welcome to session 3 of our AR workshop. Today we are going to be continuing our content creation with a focus on Tinkercad. Just a reminder, the session is being recorded, and please do make sure that you have your Tinkercad account already set up, because we'll be going straight into doing some content creation. So go ahead and take a minute just to introduce yourself. I think most of us are returning from our previous sessions, but please do let us know your name and where you are joining us from today. You can just pop that in the chat. So again, my name is Lindsay Stetter. I'm a digital teaching and learning specialist for ACS International Schools. I'm also an Apple Distinguished Educator and one of the managers for our regional training center. We are a collective group of 3 schools here in the UK, ACS Cobham, Egham and Hillingdon. And we are one of the new 2021 to 2022 regional training centers. If you want to follow us on Twitter, we are at ACSRTC. You can follow me at linsdive85. If you do need to reach out for any type of support, you can contact me just through Twitter or our email address, acsrtc@gmail.com. So for today's session, we've done our welcome. We'll be doing a quick recap and reflection from our previous session, and then we'll be getting to explore a hands-on with Tinkercad for 3D content creation. And then towards the end, we will discuss different ways of applying this, and then our close for today. As previously mentioned in our other sessions, this is a 6-week course aimed at improving your understanding of AR in education while maximizing content creation within the iPad, and it is a progression designed to develop your skill set. So where we are in our journey is session 3 with a focus on Tinkercad for content creation. Last week was 2D with focusing on creating with Keynote. This time is 3D with Tinkercad. So for this session, you will need your iPad, you will need the Tinkercad app, and hopefully your account already, as well as your workbook. So our key learning outcomes for the session today. Number 1 is definitely to explore the creative tools in Tinkercad. We're going to go through some of the basics together, and then it's really just no limit to your creativity. So whatever it is that you want to have a play around with or try on your end, by all means. If there's something fun that you're creating, do feel free to share that with us on Twitter. We're definitely going to be looking at the application of models and how those can apply to different curriculum topics. And then how to talk about file exporting and organizing your files once you have created them so that you can use them for the AR creations. And this is going to play heavily into when we meet again after the fall break here in the UK. So in the next 2 weeks, we'll be talking a lot about how to utilize those files when you're making immersive AR experiences for your students. So we've got a lot to get to today. It should be really, really fun. So I want to open it up with a discussion in the chat of just getting your thoughts about what benefit does creating your own 3D assets for AR provide? So take a moment just to think about that question and pop down any thoughts that you have relating to being able to feel confident enough or empowered enough to create your own 3D assets for the use in AR. And I can see we've got Leslie already has popped in choice, control, and impact. And that's really powerful when the teachers have more choice and more control over what is being utilized, that you're not relying on someone else to have to make it for you, but you can definitely customize something based on what you want your students to experience. And because of that, the impact can be really quite strong with your students and them having the understanding of what you're trying to teach. So that's a great suggestion there. So do please pop any thoughts that you're having. I'll just give you another 30 seconds to share your thoughts on that question. And again, anything that you're finding interesting, please do jot that down in your Pages workbook. We should be into session 3, which are the sort of reddish pinky pages that we've got. Personalize and ensure the content is relevant to the topic. Absolutely. So you don't have to always have something that someone else has made. You can absolutely have more say over the specifics that you really want your student. So I really like that idea. Fantastic. Any other suggestions with that, please do pop them in the chat. I'm sure everyone here will benefit from shared ideas and expertise. So let's take a moment and recap and reflect on what we learned last week when we were talking about utilizing Keynote for creating 2D assets that we can then utilize in AR Maker. So creating with Keynote, more and more people are getting involved with doing this. And what we specifically focused on last week are a few different things. So we talked about what you can create. We brought in clip arts, memojis, text, photography, drawing, how you can then customize those types of things with different formatting, colors, changing them to becoming, having a transparent background, and then exporting as a PNG file, which can then easily be imported directly into AR Maker so that you can use your creations right away. Process is very simple and very straightforward. And the beautiful thing is Keynote is becoming utilized as a tool, not just for these types of things, but for lots of different subject areas. So the fact that students can utilize a tool they're already fairly confident with, already very familiar with, and then elevate what they create to be used in a tool like AR Maker means it's less time for you having to teach the tool and more time getting your students to use that tool to share their knowledge and learning, and then elevating it with bringing it into augmented reality. So that's what we talked a bit about last week. And I would like to know if anyone has had any successes in being able to integrate any of your content creation with Keynote and AR Maker. I'll just pop 30 seconds on my timer. If you've had any successes or things that you took away from our second session and were able to then immediately apply in your classroom, that you can pop that in the chat. And I know we did have a participant last week who immediately went off and was able to share some things that they took away from the session on Twitter. So if there's anything that you want to pop in, please do, because we're all here to learn, and sharing is a great way that we can do that. Okay. So again, our workbook is key to helping us stay organized throughout these different sessions with all of the information and terminology that gets brought up. So we are definitely looking at session 3, continuing content creation with the focus on Tinkercad. So here you can utilize this place for anything that's shared in the chat or anything that I mentioned during the training that you want to have as a key takeaway to try later on. And again, those questions to really get you thinking about what connections can you make to your curriculum with the processes that I'm going to teach you today, how you prepare your students to use Tinkercad, and in what ways can using Tinkercad provide more access for your students. There is a third section there. I'm not sure why the image hasn't come through, but it's a place for you to put any of your successes or anything that you've tried with Tinkercad in your class, whether it's photos, screenshots, screen recordings, any of that can be included as evidence for you to reflect on. And then finally, the reflection questions at the end. So working with Tinkercad is all about understanding 3D models, and there's really no limit to what you can create except your own level of creativity and how much you want to put into it regarding detail. So we're going to take a moment and chat with one of my colleagues who has kindly jumped into the chat today to talk about her use and to, give her teacher testimony about utilizing Tinkercad in the classroom. So Leslie, I'm going to kindly ask you to unmute yourself now, and you have the floor.
So I'm going to be honest and say the first time, and Lindsay knows this, I was scared. I was totally and truly scared because I didn't want to fail, and I really knew what my students felt like. And then working with Lindsay and really coming to her with ideas and learning how to develop that comfort, I started out small, and then I started to get larger and larger as my confidence grew. So using the same assets, I would use Tinkercad. I would actually kind of, teachers, I think we're great people who know how to take other people's work and use it to our benefit. And Tinkercad allows you to do that as well as create your own once you develop that confidence. So I would encourage you to play around. That's the biggest way to do it, and know that you're going to fail. And I think teachers, when we do that in front of students, it really empowers them as well to know that it's okay. And so I have done now a 3D scavenger hunt using assets that I've found in Tinkercad or created myself. I've done 2 escape rooms using Reality Composer with Lindsay's help. And then I've actually utilized some 3D resources that are just apps, just like a 3D Google Earth and stuff, just to allow the kids to experience different types of 3D assets. And it really brings the curriculum to life for them. So right now I'm trying to create a math AR for a review for ratios and unit rates. And I'm creating a classroom, and based on what I'm learning from Lindsay, I'm even improving how I'm going to do that. So I'm continuing to learn as well. So anyway, that's it. I'm off my high horse.
Thank you very much for sharing, Leslie. And I'll invite you to share again in just a moment about your example that we have. But I did want to pull a few different samples of ways that you can utilize Tinkercad for different subject areas. So being able to create things in different languages as 3D models is really quite empowering and allows it for a lot more access by utilizing the different keyboards that you have available on your iPad, and being able to take that text, convert it to the right kind of file that will then allow you to make a 3D model of the particular language. And I apologize, I know this is likely not anything real, or I've written something terribly wrong in Arabic, but I just wanted to be able to demonstrate that you can utilize different languages that have different alphabets and be able to bring those types of things into Tinkercad to make 3D models. And I'll invite Leslie to share about this project, which was an escape room, but utilizing Tinkercad 3D models.
So with this, I actually found this Mesopotamian city in Tinkercad, and it allowed me to just download it. And then what I did was I added my assets, which you'll see one coming up here in the back of this building. And that's just out of Keynote. So I would take some questions and add some pictures and then slide that into Reality Composer. But again, everything that I found as far as this town is directly out of Tinkercad. I may have changed a little bit here and there, but that's what Tinkercad allows you to do, is you can take somebody else's work that they've done this wonderful job and then make changes to it if they allow you, if it's not locked, and then have it where it works for what you're wanting to do. So I use this in relation to a numbers file where the kids inputted their information, their answers based off the questions that they found that were found all over this ancient Mesopotamian city. It was fun.
Fantastic, Leslie. And so again, Tinkercad does provide that gallery of resources, even if you're not able to download someone else's work who's sharing it, but be able to be inspired by what is possible, what the potential is. And for Leslie, it's been that stepping stone to elevate the use of AR in the classroom, where she hasn't had to make everything from scratch, but she can absolutely have the combination of a ready-made resource combined with the specific content that she wants her students to interact with. And in this case, students had to explore the city and find the content that had been hidden, and then answer the questions relevant to that content. And we'll definitely talk more about that when we get into session 4. Being able to do fun things, even for the little ones, create these 3D models that you're able to bring to life right in your school environment. So last year, we were able to bring things like Rudolph into the courtyard, or have a 3-dimensional Polar Express that drove up into the schoolyard and played music and sounds. And it was really a fun way of engaging children with the holidays, but linking it to literacy and provocations in that way, which was really quite fun. And again, just simply playing around with shapes in Tinkercad. Again, literacy, building something like a hall of letters, which was a very complex file in Reality Composer to make, but utilizing the 3D models that were made or created using Tinkercad, in this case, customizing all of the alphabet to be different colors and different fonts and so on, and then being able to utilize some different shapes as well to then customize a hall of sounds, a hall of letters that students could explore as a file. So lots of flexibility there. Or maybe it's something about a model that you don't have available, but by going into the Tinkercad gallery or being able to create your own and making it specific to what you want to teach your students, the flexibility is there within those types of tools. And it really helps to take things from abstract and reading about it to then actually being able to have it, manipulate it and play with it, interact with it in some way. So it can help to elevate the understanding of concepts as we move from the abstract to the more concrete. So creating with Tinkercad is, I know for a lot of schools, their focus has always been on design and technology. And Tinkercad can be so much more than that when you utilize the tools that are available and start creating your own assets. It's a very simple and straightforward process. It just takes a bit of repetition, as I'm sure Leslie can attest to. Once you get into it, and once you have your first successes with it, you'll want to keep coming back and you'll feel more empowered to step into this world of 3D design. We know that there are a lot of 3D design applications out there and programs and softwares and so on that require a whole different way of thinking, require a whole different level of design and detail. And for the basic things that we want to do, working with shapes and combining shapes is more than sufficient. So let's take a look at creating with Tinkercad. Most recently, they had an update regarding the shapes library, which used to look very different. When you first go into Tinkercad and you create a new file, you'll see initially some shapes. But on the right-hand side, if you tap on the shapes library, Tinkercad have had an update, I think it's within the last few months, that now all of the extra shapes that they have available for different categories are now in fact categorized very visually. And so it's important to understand that you can use any of those types of things to start a creation, whether you're going to do some form of science model, maybe with circuitry, or you want to design something like a room or a physical space that students can move around in. Really, the whole platform is your oyster to explore. I just wanted to highlight a few key things when you're in the shapes library. The first is that you can draw free drawings in Tinkercad, as well as utilizing text, and those can be found under the basic shapes. So those tend to be my go-to when I'm working with Tinkercad. The third is definitely the gallery or the community area, so that you can tinker with other creations that other creators have made available. And that's a really good starting point. So if you come into it and you're really not sure where to get started, you can go in and do a search and see what other people have created. And if they allow you to, you can download and tinker with their design that they have made, or else use it as inspiration or as a starting point of going, oh, I didn't realize that they combined a cylinder with a sphere to make that particular shape, but then you might want to have a go yourself. So we're going to move into the demo section now, and this is where we're going to get hands-on with Tinkercad. I'm just going to jump over to my file. I was playing around with a bit before, so I'll go back to my home screen. And so when you've created your account, obviously I will allow you to explore as much as you want to when it comes to utilizing this with your students, because obviously you can go in much more detail with creating classes and assigning students and giving them projects and so on. But I'm addressing this more from your point of view of being able to make 3D files that we can utilize with augmented reality. So there's a lot of things in here that I don't necessarily make use of, simply for the fact that I'm not working with students in that way. I'm more supporting our teaching staff. So initially you'll come in, you can see your profile, you can see I've set mine up with my little Memoji character. You've got different options, 3D designs, circuits, if you're utilizing those, code blocks. You can code with Tinkercad as well, or making use of any of their pre-made lessons, and again, your classes. But for the most part, I tend to work just in this area. And you can see I've been going in and tinkering and playing around with a lot of different designs, from accessible swings or working in coral reefs or insects and so on. But then at the top, you do have some other options. The gallery is a good place to go and look to get inspiration, see what others have made. But for the purposes of this demonstration, we're going to start with creating a new design. So this is your workspace. Anything that you're going to be building should be able to fit on your work plane here. You can utilize your fingers to rotate it around, to look underneath, look on top, or you can make use of the little cube in the corner and rotate it in that regard as well. Every Tinkercad file that you create will come up with its own name. And a lot of the times the names don't make sense. So my first recommendation, as I've said about Keynote as well, is always to rename your file. And that way, when you finish working with it, when you finish your creation, you're able to go back and find that file really easily because you've given it a specific name. So for this one, I'm just going to change it to, there we go. Okay. So now if I ever want to come back to that particular model, I know what I will be searching for. So on our right-hand side, we have our basic three-dimensional shapes. We've got a range of different things to choose from, as well as our text option and our Scribble tool. So text is going to be right there, and Scribble is going to be right over there. You'll notice that all of the shapes have a pre-designated color, but you can absolutely adjust that color afterwards once you brought it onto your work plane. So even though it's green for this shape, we don't have to keep it that color. Additionally, we've got some shapes that have these lines across them, and these are preset to be a transparent or no-fill shape. And so whenever you use them, they will essentially cut out whatever part you don't want to have of another shape. And we'll talk about that in just a moment. If we go over to where our menu option is, our drop-down menu of basic shapes, we then have that menu that I showed you in the Keynote file. So basic shapes is always going to take you back to these main tools here for just sort of open-ended creations. But then you have more categories to dive into. This is where it can really start to get quite fun. So I quite like doing the creatures and characters. There's quite a few things to choose from, such as faces, or you've got hands, you've got feet, glasses, and really start to customize, as well as the little people, which those are really fun, especially for younger children to play around with. And then you can also scroll across the top for the different categories. So say we want to look at animals, it will go through and find all of the animals that we want to use. Maybe it's something to do with vehicles, machinery, and you've got students that are going to be designing the Mars rover. What would be a good vehicle to have on the surface of Mars to do explorations? They can come in and start to work with some of the pre-made vehicle machine tools that we have here. And the list goes on. Fun and games will just be a variety of things. Maybe it will be Halloween or holiday themed, sports, a whole variety of stuff. And so even if you don't end up using any of these, just seeing how these types of shapes have been combined together to make something else is really quite fun for the inspiration. But what we're going to do is go back to our basic shapes. And what I want us to have a go with is creating something that we can physically go inside of. And the reason being is that this is a concept that's really going to help us when we move into working with tools like Reality Composer, following our break and looking into session 4. So I think this is one of the things that if you can learn anything from today, this will probably be the most impactful. So what I'm going to do is bring in a cylinder. And when I've selected the cylinder, I want to make sure that while it's selected that I tap on the work plane. I can use my fingers to zoom in so I can get a bit closer to that shape. And then I want to make some small adjustments just to make it slightly bigger. And then slightly taller. Because the way I'm viewing this, so it's not very even. The way I'm viewing this is as a physical space that I want to be able to go inside of. So once I've got my cylinder set to the size I want, I might want to change the color, because whatever colors I end up customizing or formatting my shapes to be, that's the color it's going to be exported as to use in AR. So I'm going to tap on my cylinder, and you can see a little drop-down menu has appeared. Whereas if I tap off it, it's disappeared. So once it's selected, I can then go to the colors. I'm just going to go ahead and make a blue one. Quite like blue. I can rotate around and I can see, looks pretty even to me. I'm happy with that. The idea is that I want this to be a physical space I can actually walk inside of when I'm viewing it with AR. So in order to do that, I need to cut out part of this shape. And that means I'm going to have to hollow out the inside of it. Now, in order to do that, I'm going to tap on my shape and I'm going to use the duplicate tool, or you could do Control D, but I'm going to do that. And that has now made a copy, even though it's sitting on top of it and I don't see it right away. If I move it, I can now see that there is a copy there. And what I want to do is I want to make just some small adjustments, because this is going to fit inside of my original cylinder and hollow out the inside of it. So I'm going to change it to be transparent, and I'm just going to make it slightly smaller so that it does fit inside my cylinder. And as I move it, you can see it's starting to combine with the existing cylinder. So now it's almost fit inside. Now, to be sure that I've got the proportions correct, I'm going to look at the bottom. And that will tell me if I need to make any further adjustments. At the moment, I can see inside there's going to be this wall, and all of this dark gray area is going to be hollowed out. But I need to make sure that wall goes all the way around, and that way I can then put in a door later on. So I need to make a small adjustment. That's probably about good there. And I've got fairly even wall going all the way around the outside. So if you can see the color difference, I've got the blue here, which is the edge going all the way around. And then I've got the dark gray area here. And this is going to be the hollowed out inside. Now, if I zoom out and rotate background to looking at the shape, I want to make sure that it hasn't gone through the top. And that's fine. That's all still closed off, because what we're doing is giving the illusion of this physical space that we can go inside. Now, in order to get in there, I mean, obviously I can physically walk in there with the iPad, but to give the illusion to a student that I'm physically going into a space, I need to provide some form of door. And so you can pick whatever type of shape that you want and go from there. I'm going to go ahead and pick this, there we go, this shape here. And I can make it really, really thin because I don't need it to be too wide. And then I can just customize it by resizing it so that I get a sort of a door. And I'm going to get it the right size first before I then make it transparent. So I'm going to stretch that out so I can see that it's gone directly through the shape. And you can see right there, that's how much it's going to cut into that. But obviously me walking with an iPad, I'm not going to bend down to get in there. I want it to be a little bit taller. So I'm going to raise that up. Okay, I'm actually going to thin it out a little bit. There you go. And so that's going to end up being the doorway. So in order to then cut that doorway out, while it's selected, I need to change it to be transparent. So now in theory, we have this cylindrical room, if you will, a cylindrical space with a door that students are going to be able to physically walk through. And then it will all be this open room inside. So the last thing I want to do is add some fun embellishment. So I want to make sure that I have a roof on the top. So I'm going to bring in a cone. I'm just going to slide that across. And then from the top down, I'm just going to resize it so that it fits the space that I have. And then we just sort of rotate around. If we've got any, oh, yeah, we can see right there, got a bit of a gap. So I'm going to just lower that down using the arrows, just ever so slightly. And now we've got a little hut there. Okay, can you just give me a thumbs up in the chat or on your icon there? Just let me know you're at a good point if you need me to wait, because what we're going to do is just move into how we can view this now in AR. Okay, I can see a couple hands, one hand. Fantastic. Lovely. Okay. All right, so what we're going to do now is we want to make sure that this is actually a resource I could start to use. So you have a tool up in the top here called AR Viewer, and this does tell you if you linger on it, view your design in AR. So if I tap on that now, here we can see is my little house. If I move around, it can show me lots of different places that I can place this. But what I want to do is when I'm ready, I tap on my design and that will place it. And obviously it's to scale, so it's really quite small. So what I need to do is now stretch it out, make it a little bit bigger. Now you can see I have this actual space. I'm going to move away from my computer, so hopefully you can still hear me. But I can now go inside it. And so this is a really great way of being able to create different types of 3D spaces for your students, which then, as we saw in Leslie's Mesopotamia example, we can utilize with tools like Reality Composer and bring in our two-dimensional assets. So in theory, I could have this space and I could hide different text or different pictures or different content for the students inside of this room. But all I've done at this point is just make that space that they can physically move into with their iPad. And that's just utilizing some of the basic 3D shapes. Okay, do we have any questions at this point before we move on? I just want to make sure that I address any questions if anyone has any at this time. If not, you can just give me a thumbs up and I will press on. Fantastic. Okay, so another tool that we can make use of is the text tool. So I'm going to go ahead and tap on the text and then tap right on our screen here. Now, obviously, when we're working with designing immersive experiences, some of our text we may want to have made in another format, such as Keynote, and then bring it into tools like Reality Composer. But sometimes we want to have just maybe something that draws the student's attention. And that's a great time to use 3D text. So at the moment, you can see it sitting here on the surface. I'd kind of like it to not be laying down and be standing up. And if you notice, some of these arrows will appear and tell you, oh, you can rotate this on either the X, the Y, or the Z axis. Now, because I want it standing up and making it look like it's sitting on the table, I'm going to choose the arrow towards the end and just rotate it to about 90 degrees. And we can see now it is standing up, but it's also gone straight through the work plane. So I need to raise it up so it's sitting on the surface. And so now it should be sitting flat on the surface. Now with text, there are some formatting options, but there are also some limitations. You cannot utilize, you used to be able to, I'm not sure why they did away with it, but you cannot utilize different language keyboards for this part. I will show you how you can go about doing that in just a moment. But in order to customize your text, you'd click on the drop-down menu while your text box is selected. And then you have a line here for text. So maybe I just want to do something like welcome. You can make some adjustments quite easily just with these, or you can just come in and use the little blocks here to make adjustments that way. So whatever your preference is. And then again, you can choose the colors. So I'm going to go ahead and pick something quite obnoxious. So I've got my orange there. And then text can also be combined with some of the shapes. If you wanted to have that as a greeting on the front of your little property here, you can make it quite thin, you can make it quite fat, short, however you want. So I'm just going to do that as a sign that sits right in my house there. And you can see it's stuck in there. They're both combined together. So now when I view that in AR, it will be sitting right there. And one of the other tools that is really quite fun to play around with is Scribble. And Scribble will just allow you to draw 3D designs with some limitations. And Scribble is just here right underneath your red cube. So if we tap on that and then tap on the screen, it will take you away from the work plane. It will give you a drawing space. Now you can use your finger, or if you've got an Apple Pencil or a stylus, you can make use of that as well. So for this one, I'm just going to draw a picture of a little heart. Now, if I leave it as that, we can go to show preview, and it will preview what that model could potentially look like. So you can see it's hollow on the inside. It's got quite a thick edge going around the outside, but I want this all to be colored in. So I'm going to go back to my design. I'm going to color it all the way in. And then I can preview again. Happy with that. Click on the done button in the bottom right-hand corner. And now we can see there is the heart. For some reason, it always comes through as a light blue color. So I'm going to go ahead and change that to, wow, vibrant pink there. If you need to make a change to it, you can click Edit Scribble. You can also then adjust the dimensions of it. So I might want to make mine just a little bit smaller. And again, using those little arrows to rotate it, move it around. I'm just going to pop that right next to my house and have it sitting down there. Okay, and there is the Scribble tool. So you can end up just getting lost in creating in here. It's really quite therapeutic when you get in the zone. And so obviously kids quite enjoy that as well. And so those are the main features about utilizing the shapes I find really beneficial, especially when you start to bring these into AR. So if I go back into my AR viewer now, we'll see what the new changes are that I've added in. There we go. There's my little house. I can stretch that back out again. There we can see welcome. Students might go right inside that little house and find some directions that are hidden in there. But just being able to make these types of spaces that you can physically go inside with your iPad is taking it beyond just seeing something in AR and then interacting with it, even in a basic fashion is quite good. Okay. Now, one of the other things I did want to show is how to make use of different language keyboards. As I said before, there used to be the possibility of tapping on the text making a text box and utilizing a different language keyboard on your iPad. For some reason, that seems like it's no longer supported. So a workaround is what we're going to do right now. So we're going to jump into Safari. I'm going to go to Google Draw. And your first option there, Google Drawings. And what I have right here is automatically just a transparent workspace. But what I want to do is bring in a text box. Now in that text box, I'm going to start typing. I'm going to bring up some symbols in the Arabic keyboard. You could pick any kind of language that uses a different keyboard or a different alphabet to practice this. But I lived in the UAE for a few years, so I'm more comfortable with the Arabic keyboard. Even though I don't speak Arabic. So I'm going to go ahead and bring that up. And just to make use of, there we go, show the keyboard. And again, I could do this with some spaces in between, just to show if you have multilingual students or staff that they can bring in their own language in this way. And once I've got it typed, I definitely want to make it a bit bigger. So I'm going to increase the size to about 100 point. Oh, change my keyboard out of Arabic. There we go. Help if I selected it. There we go. And so now we've got a slightly bigger version of those Arabic letters. Okay. Once I've got that, I want to make sure that I am able to bring that into Tinkercad. And this is a little bit of a process here because there's a few steps to do it. But once you've understood that workflow, it's just a matter of repetition. So within the Google Drawing, we go to File, we go to Download, and we go to Scalable Vector Graphics, or SVG, which Tinkercad is able to read. Not all, but most SVG files. So I'm going to tap on that. And as we're working in Safari, if you're working in Google Chrome, it looks slightly different. But it'll say, do you want to download this? And I'm very bad, not following my own practice, did not name it. So I'm just going to say, yes, download Untitled Drawing. And I can see it's working away up in the corner here. And there it is. I've done this a few times. So now I'm going to go back into Tinkercad. And we're going to make use of the import feature. So I'm able to import different files into Tinkercad to use and create new 3D models. So I'm going to click on import. And it says, well, what do you want to do? You can drag and drop a 2D or 3D file here or choose from your computer. I'm going to choose a file. And at the bottom, you can see what type of files it will support, the STL, the OBJ, and the SVG. I'm going to choose a file. And I know that my download has saved to my download. So I'm not going to go into photos or to take a photo. I'm going to go to choose file. And I'm going to search in my downloads. And I know it's under the untitled, which is going to be near the bottom here. So there we are, Untitled Drawing 6. I can see it there. I want it to be centered on the artboard and import. We can see right now it's working away, importing that in the background. And there we have a file, which we can then adjust and resize. So for those teachers that, you might work with and they go, well, that's not going to work for what I have to teach. Well, I say, yes, it can, because we can make use of different language keyboards by utilizing that process. So really quite straightforward. Finally, the last part I want to talk about is now that we've made our file, and I'm just going to delete that for just a moment. And again, select and click on the bin, or if you've got a keyboard, you can just click the backspace button. If I want to save this to utilize it as a 3D AR file later on, I have to export it out of Tinkercad. So we have right next to import, we've got export. And then we've got some different options. So obviously Tinkercad can be used for 3D modeling or design and technology courses. And so you'll have different types of files that you can export that would be read by a 3D printer. But for AR files, we have one type that we're going to be working with, and that is our USDZ files. That is a file type that is compatible with most AR tools such as Reality Composer. So we definitely want to make sure that we are exporting as that. Now, what I tend to do is save to files. So once I've done the export portion in Tinkercad, the iPad takes over and we go to save to files. And then I've been doing this process a lot, so it automatically will find my Reality Composer file, and it will start to store all of my 3D models in there. You can make a new folder for yourself, however you want to do it, but I do recommend having a go-to file to store all of your USDZ files that you create or that you download and work with in one place, because otherwise you will have to have really good searching abilities or a different method of being able to bring those into a tool like Reality Composer. So I'm saying, right, I'm happy with that. I know that the name is what I want it to be. I know where I'm going to be able to find that file later on, so I can just click save. And that file has now been set straight to my files. I personally do not like storing my USDZ or 3D files in Google Drive. I like them directly in my files on my iPad, because the iPad is able to project and work with those files really easily. Whereas if it's in Google Drive, I have to re-download that file and have it then imported into the AR tool that I want to be working with. But there we have a very simple approach to making something as a 3D file for augmented reality using Tinkercad. One final thing to mention is if you're doing any kind of collaborative work, so you're working with another teacher on creating a 3D file, you can allow for collaboration. And so you would generate a new link and share that to the person that you want to be able to collaborate with. You could also log into a computer like a Mac and go on the Tinkercad online through your account, start doing some work there, pick it up again later on your iPad to be able to view it in AR. So you can move between two different types of devices. I personally like to do it directly on the iPad so I can view the file right away, make sure the dimensions are what I want it to be for my specific purpose. And so that is a brief overview of working with Tinkercad. I'm going to switch now back to our keynote. And we'll bring this back to our discussion now. So just thinking, either you can come off mic or you can type into the chat. In what ways could you begin to apply what you have learned? Maybe it's a specific workflow for you as a teacher that you'd not thought about before. Maybe it's looking at utilizing 3D models to support literacy or language development, or maybe maths. However it is that you're thinking of applying this, go ahead and pop that into the chat so that we have the opportunity to learn and share from each other. I'll give you about 30 seconds to about a minute to share any ideas that you have at this time. So we've got a few suggestions here, creating a 3D model of houses and homes for younger students. That's great, especially if you're doing, something like a unit of inquiry where you're talking about different types of homes around the world and how those might look, depending on where you are, including what types of resources they might be made with. Leslie's mentioned again that she's working on her AR math review of building a classroom with Tinkercad and having the students be able to move around in that space, allowing kids to create shapes with different size ratios. Absolutely. Making entry space as a training opener. Okay, so all good suggestions. Again, you can jot those down in your Pages workbook, any ideas that you want to take away. And please do share what you learned. If you were able to build anything, I would love to see it, because I so rarely get to see through these Zoom trainings what people do end up walking away making. So you can tag us at ACSRTC with the hashtag AppleRTC. As always, I do like to leave you with a resource. So this is the time you get your iPads and your camera ready. I have created some Tinkercad resource cards. What these cards will do is walk you through some of these workflows that I've addressed today, step by step. I've tried to minimize them to only 3 steps for each process, but they'll include things like how to make those hollowed out shapes, how to import and export, how to make an SVG file, how to combine and incorporate shapes. So you can absolutely have a copy of those. Should be a PDF that you can print out, laminate, blow up, whatever it is that you want to do, or just have on hand on your iPad to support utilizing Tinkercad for 3D model creations. I'll just leave that up for another minute so everyone can grab that. And Emma's just mentioned here as well, looking at scale such as animals and plants. Absolutely. Yeah, bringing scale into it as well is a fantastic opportunity for math connections. And just to close, we are now open for session number 4. And session number 4 is really going to be looking at what we've learned in those first 3 sessions and how we can start to now integrate it with Reality Composer. And Reality Composer is going to be the tool that will feature prominently in the second half of our 6-week workshop. So make sure that you've got that available. Please do have a try with some of the things that we talked about today or in the previous sessions, because we will be starting to apply 2D asset creation and 3D asset creation with Keynote and Tinkercad, organizing those files to then bring into a tool like Reality Composer. And so that is the sign up for session 4. This will be on November 1st, I believe, same time, 3 to 4. And the recording will be available, even if you're not available to join live. Do sign up and then I can email that out to you, as well as any additional resources. And we'll now open it up to any questions.